Hello Serie A fan. Juventus, flavour of the month, last month, and no look back pass adds to Pirlo's newfound woes in Porto. But let's not dwell on the past. There's fireworks ahead. The Milan rivalry is red hot ahead of the derby, as Inter take top spot after Milan lose to Spezia. We discuss all of that, plus a penchant for gardening, the new king of the bongos, in this episode of Scudetto. Hello everyone and welcome to Scudetto, your weekly roundup of top-flight Italian football. And we've all been keeping an eye on the Italian teams in Europe this midweek, which we'll be talking about. But Boaz, do not worry, we haven't forgotten about what happened last weekend. So we'll be talking about that as well. And also looking ahead to the big games that are coming this weekend, namely the Milan Derby and Atalanta versus Napoli. So plenty for us to get through. But first, let's catch up with the squad. Boaz, how are you doing? How's your week been?
I'm doing very well. I got my second vaccination this week.
So I know that podcasting is obviously very important work, but I imagine it doesn't qualify you as a key worker. How have you managed to get access to that so early?
Israel is quite ahead of the curve, and also they sent a tweet to Scudetto Pod saying they were big fans and they really needed me to try this vaccination.
Is Viola Club Israel in charge of the vaccination program?
It could be, I don't know.
Number one Scudetto fan, Roberto Baggio. That's what I heard. So anyway, have you got a beer, Buzz?
I do. Unfortunately, my beer saga continues. We won't mention it. It's getting quite tedious. But I've found a local IPA called The Hero.
Good news. Kenny, how are you doing? What's going on in Scotland this week?
I'm good. Nothing as exciting as being vaccinated. My mum and dad are getting vaccinated tomorrow, though. But I do have, it's been an eventful week for lockdown-related reasons. I found out my car battery was dead and my boiler broke down after 2 weeks of freezing weather. Both fixed now, so back to normal. Other than that, no real excitement. Just sat indoors looking at the same four walls. And Serie A football, of course.
Yeah, good to have that to break up the days. And have you got a beer to tell us about?
I do. I've got a beer from Drygate Brewing Company, who are the brewers of the much ridiculed disco forklift truck. This one, however, is called Crossing the Rubicon. It's a West Coast IPA. I haven't tasted it yet, but I'll taste it now.
Good stuff.
That name sounds familiar. Are you sure you haven't had it before?
I don't remember having it before. I remember seeing it a lot.
I do remember something with Rubicon in the name, actually. Wasn't that one of yours, though, Baz?
I think it wasn't one of mine, but I'm pretty sure we Googled the word as well.
We'll check the archive.
Highbrow podcasting.
I can tell you that it tastes pretty strong. It's 6.9%, so maybe that's why I don't remember. But it tastes quite nice, but quite strong.
Good to know. Yeah, speaking of cold weather, actually, I've had quite a fun day. I've walked across the bay, which is obviously all frozen over. The sea's frozen here, at least out to a certain depth, and visited Soirasari, which is like a little island in the bay of Helsinki. It was quite nice for a couple of kilometers walking across ice. Saw some people ice fishing. But in terms of a beer, I've got something called IPA the Shiba. It's from Etco Brewery, and it's named after the brewery dog. It's pretty good. It kind of tastes like rice snacks. It's got kind of umami flavors. I'm enjoying it so far.
Strange pitch, but interesting.
Yeah. Okay, that's enough nonsense. Let's get on to the football. I think we're going to start off by talking about Juventus, because we all watched Juventus last night in a kind of shock defeat to Porto. They ended up getting the away goal, but they were 2-0 down at one point, brought it back to 2-1. But I think, first of all, we want to talk about the game against Napoli. Kenny, with the first point we've got written here is Chiellini madness, referring, of course, to the penalty that he gave away. What did you make of this game? It did seem like Juventus kind of threw this one away a little bit.
Yeah, it was self-destruct, and I think this is it's been a theme of the last couple of games, really, that Juve just haven't got going in the first half, and they've paid for it. But yeah, an absolute moment of madness from Chiellini has cost them. Really, Juventus didn't have that much to deal with other than the penalty. They'll be very, very disappointed to have lost this. I mean, every single week we use the word roller coaster. Here we are again. I think last week we were talking about how finally they seem to have found some sort of consistency, and they've gone and lost 2 games that they shouldn't have lost. And the picture looks very, very different again. I think perhaps part of this is just the fact that I think people are trying to change things up a little bit, perhaps due to some sort of key personnel being unavailable, but they just don't really have the time in terms of preparing for games to do that. And maybe now of all times, I hate to be the person that says just like keep it simple, 4-4-2, etc., etc. But now possibly is the time for that, rather than chopping and changing. I think it's kind of bit them quite hard on this occasion. And yeah, 2 games in which have terrible first halves, much better in the second half, but not enough.
Yeah, I mean, fair to say that they've been forced into some of these changes. They've got a growing injury list, haven't they, Baz?
Yeah, it's not been pretty, but at the same time, they're faced with the same issues as most other clubs are. It's possible that Juventus have been missing players who are more important to their general play. But as we've said at the beginning of the season, along with Inter, Juventus have the best squad. And a lot of these injuries are in defense. And when you can call up the likes of Demiral or De Ligt to replace an injured centre-back, you really can't have many complaints.
Yeah, I think one of the really, really interesting absences is Arthur, who I know at the beginning didn't necessarily hit the ground running, but since the Atalanta game in mid-December, he has missed 5 games in total. Of those, Juve have lost 4. So Fiorentina, Inter, Napoli, and now Porto as well. And every single game that he's been involved in, they have won. And I think it was very, very obvious that Juve were missing not necessarily him, but a player like him last night in the Porto game last night as we record. But just seems to really be the player that kind of keeps them ticking, or has become the player that keeps them ticking. So that is a particularly sore one, I guess, him being out.
Yeah, they were really struggling to win that midfield battle last night, weren't they? But I mean, if we're going to talk about last night, I think we need to talk about the manner in which Juve conceded the goals, and particularly the first goal. I mean, I guess the question, I said I was going to put the question to you today, is it ever acceptable to do a no-look back pass?
It is never acceptable to do a no-look back pass. It is especially not acceptable to do a no-look back pass when you're about 10 yards out from goal. It does have to be said as well that Szczesny gave an absolute hospital pass to Bentancur, but still doesn't excuse what he did next. And I think, Oscar, we were talking before we recorded about how the commentators on UK television were saying that he went on from that and had a great game. For me, for a half an hour after that, Bentancur was an absolute nervous wreck. I mean, he got dispossessed again in a very dangerous position not long afterwards. He kind of went on a decent run and then massively overhit a pretty simple through ball. He tried one of many Juve diagonal balls that went about 20 yards over the byline. So didn't cover himself in glory, let's say.
Yeah, he came back into the game in the second half, but definitely the first half was not his best work. And I mean, Juventus as a whole, to be fair to him, did not have a good first half, and they didn't have a good first half against Napoli either. And Baz, you were commenting last night saying that Pirlo looked at a bit of a loss. I mean, he looked even a bit dishevelled, which a man who's usually obviously very well groomed. Perhaps that tells a bit of a story. But what do you think's going on for him at the moment?
Juventus took a lot of flack in the last few days in Italian media with regards to their insistence on passing it out from the back. Now, this is a big discussion, and in theory, the numbers are in your favor. The more you play it from the back, the more you can get into attacking situations. Pirlo claimed after the game that he doesn't have any players up top who can hold the ball up. But for a start, I think passing it from the back just for the sake of passing it from the back is kind of suicidal. And besides, Ronaldo and Morata up front are quite big lads. They should be able to bring a ball down or two. And considering I just mentioned Ronaldo, you have to mention that in both the Napoli game and in this game, the Porto game, he was very anonymous. Juve are kind of slaves to him. If he plays great, then the team does great. But once he kind of sticks himself in a rut, the whole team suffers. There was an interesting episode in the Porto game where he kind of dribbled past one player and ran into his own player and obviously got pissed off. It doesn't show that his teammate knows where he should be standing. It doesn't show that Ronaldo trusts his teammates to just pass them the ball. So, yeah, the nightmarish defending had something to do with it. But as a whole, as you said, the Juventus squad didn't perform with the exception of maybe one or two players.
Yeah, Ronaldo did look pretty anonymous. I think after about half an hour, I said that when Juve are attacking, I can't even see him on the screen. But I mean, we're talking about this as if it was a bad result, which I think it was a bad result. But at the same time, 2-1 away in the Champions League, it's still very, you wouldn't bet against Juventus qualifying, would you? And the goal that probably Chiesa was the one silver lining from Juve. You were impressed with him, weren't you, Kenny?
Yeah, not just in this game, but in the Napoli game as well. It just seems like everything dangerous that Juve created came through him. He wasn't scared to look for the ball. He was always showing, even when the chips were down, just like full of energy. Great finish. Boaz actually and I were chatting in the WhatsApp group earlier. Kind of, Boaz feels perhaps it was slightly fortuitous. I can't remember if it was. I think it was either Pires or Thierry Henry who apparently had made sort of a skill of doing this, hitting the ball into the ground. I thought it was a great finish. I thought he was great. I agree with you that 2-1 is a decent result for Juventus, especially given the way the game went. However, I do think that Juve should have had a stonewall penalty at the end there on Ronaldo, and I'm not sure why that didn't go to VAR.
Yeah, it was a funny one, wasn't it? We were all talking about it as it happened, and the explanation, at least on this broadcast that we were watching, Kenny, was that Ronaldo was falling over anyway, so it's not a foul. I'm not convinced he was falling over. And I'm also not sure that makes it not a foul.
Yeah, I agree. On both counts, I agree. I think perhaps he was going to ground, but it's not like he slipped and had completely lost his sort of sense of balance. I mean, perhaps he might have had to sort of put a hand down. He had absolutely no one around him. So, I mean, I don't see if the defender completely wipes you out, it doesn't really matter if you're off balance or not. If he wipes you out, it's a penalty. I thought it was a penalty.
As part of his post-match commentary interviews, Pirlo said that the ref had told him that he'd whistled the final whistle before the foul was committed, which sounded a bit weak to me.
But we've seen them given after time.
Exactly, with the Man United precedent earlier in the season, I think that should have been given. I just want to touch on the goal before, because Kenny mentioned me, but I'm not sure I felt it was fortuitous in the sense that I think he did what he meant to do, but I think he had to get it exactly right to bounce over the defender and go into the corner, not go too high, not go left or right. I'm not saying it was lucky, but it's one of those 1 in 10 chances, 1 in 5, let's say.
Yeah, fair enough. We've probably talked a bit too long about this game, so let's move on to the Milan derby. Milan were actually in action this evening, Boaz, weren't they? How did they get on against Red Star in the end? I saw they were 2-1 up.
They were 2-1 up until the 93rd minute, and they conceded a goal off a quite dodgy corner against a 10-man Red Star team who seemed slightly off the pace. So more problems for Milan in the build-up for the derby.
Yeah, that's 2 bad results, because they obviously lost to Spezia the weekend to give up, at least temporarily, the Scudetto crown. What happened there, and how are you feeling sort of ahead of the derby?
I was fairly confident about the derby before the Spezia game. Let's put it this way: Milan have not been performing to the best of their ability, but they've been getting results. And it seemed like everything was building up towards these 2 games, this midweek game in Europe and then the derby. The loss against Spezia throws a spanner into that theory, because it shows that maybe Milan were slightly lucky, or at least were making the most of their chances. But it would be wrong to discuss the Spezia-Milan game without giving some warranted attention to Spezia, who generally outplayed Milan. Cutting statistic is that Milan didn't even have a shot on target in the whole game. Vincenzo Italiano, I'm giving him so much respect. I'm not even calling him Vinny Italian. Really got his tactics right. They were pressing Milan all over the pitch. They weren't letting the likes of Calhanoglu and Benacer to get on the ball. They had in Gyan, they had a guy who was on theory he was a striker, but really he was all over the right wing. And as I said, they outplayed Milan, out-tacticked them, and Milan seemed to be idealists. So kudos to Spezia, and I think, as I said, the tendency would be to focus on Milan in this circumstance, but I think it would be wrong. Having said that, Milan were absolutely shocking. The midfield was non-existent. Zlatan was just getting angry and not really contributing much. And the same can be said for today. There was a lot of inconsistencies. There were players who were on paper key players, like Romagnoli, who were committing silly mistakes, and it doesn't bode well for the Scudetto, particularly when you consider that Inter are on a roll.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Inter in a second, but before we do, you've been praising Spezia. I think we need to put some special attention onto their medical staff, the attention they gave to Saponara.
So Spezia had a free kick for their second goal, and which they were arguing was a penalty. So things were already heating up, and they ended up scoring from this free kick. And all the players ran towards the corner flag, and for some reason, Saponara decided to pull his teammates' trousers down and his shorts down, and played the bongos on his backside. So Saponara is king of the bongos.
From the pictures you sent, I thought that it was like a physio that had been doing that, but it was one of his teammates.
Yeah, it's Saponara, and it's funny because we gave him an honourable mention a few weeks back for a deft chip, but clearly he's an eccentric off the field as well as on the field.
Excellent stuff. Okay, completely lost my train of thought with that.
Very hard to follow that up.
Could I just jump in before we do move on and say that there is a sort of caveat to Milan's performance. They were without Calabria, who obviously isn't by himself going to turn this game into a win, but also Benacer and Calhanoglu coming back into the side after lengthy spells out. So if I was a Milan fan going into the derby, the one silver lining from this game that I'd take would be that at least those two have got some playing time under the belts. I know that Benacer started today. I'm not sure did Calhanoglu come on off the bench at all, Boaz, today?
He came on very late.
Yeah, so that will be, I think we might see a slightly different Milan side going into the derby.
It's a derby, so it's completely unpredictable, and ironically, usually the team who are doing worse are the ones who end up winning. But and I think Kenny touches on an important point that for the first time in months, Milan have almost full squad available. It's slightly ironic that when they have all the squad after kind of scrapping with youth players and players who are under 20 who shouldn't be in the first team squad usually, and kind of getting results, suddenly when they have the right players, let's call them, they couldn't get a win against Spezia. But such is life, I suppose.
Yeah, as you say, form often out the window in derbies, to use a football cliche. But I mean, this one is really kind of, the rivalry is really, really heating up, isn't it? As we've discussed in previous weeks with all of the off-field antics. But apart from all that, Inter are in really good form. They're on a bit of a roll, and we should probably say something about Lukaku, who's really been finding the mark in recent weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lukaku's performance at the weekend against Lazio was absolutely sensational, and I don't think it's a coincidence that when he's out of the team, as he was in the Coppa Italia, they struggle. When he's in there, he gives them a real focal point. But I mean, just to say that he's a focal point completely undersells it, because he basically is the player that turns them into Scudetto contenders, Scudetto favorites, wherever you might have them. But yeah, I mentioned that sort of blip in the Coppa Italia, but they're on a really, really good run of results in the league. They've got 3 wins in 3. They've got 5 wins in 6. They've had a difficult spell of games when you factor in the quality of opposition that they've had in Serie A and in Coppa Italia, they've come out of it in pole position. So it's going to be, it's going to be really, really interesting. And it will be very interesting to see how Kjaer and Romagnoli deal with Lukaku. I think that could be key to where the bragging rights go.
And perhaps no coincidence that this run of good form has come with the reintroduction to Christian Eriksen into the starting lineup.
We were there all along. We were backing this move.
Yeah, I'm delighted to see him in there as someone who was very sad to see him leave Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, he seems to finally be getting a proper chance. I know Conte had said before when Eriksen was a persona non grata that he had plenty of chances. But now he seems to be getting a decent crack of the whip. And I have to say that midfield, Brozovic, Eriksen, Barella is the things that dreams are made of, really. And I think perhaps now, I've never been convinced by this story that Inter just have the best squad on paper. But when you also see Perisic actually beginning to kind of really settle into that position as left midfielder, left wing back, whatever you want to call it. Hakimi on the right, those three in midfield. There are three centre backs. Lukaku and Lautaro up top. I think there's a real obvious first 11, so long as Conte sees sense and keeps picking Eriksen over an aged Arturo Vidal.
Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be, well, hopefully, the last time I said the game was going to be a cracker on here. I think it was, we bigged up a game that was the only game with no goals a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Torino Genoa.
Last weekend.
It was a good game.
So I don't want to oversell it, but I'm definitely excited for this one. Sunday, was it Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m.? That might be Eastern European time. But following that is Atalanta Napoli, which is another game that we need to talk about because Napoli, we spoke about Gattuso's job being under pressure, and obviously they got the win against Juve, and they're currently in action against Granada. We'll give you an update at the end, but I believe they're currently losing.
It's just finished. Literally, as we're recording, it ended 2-0. They conceded 2 goals within 3 minutes in the first half.
I was actually going to say that there appeared to be a bit of a ceasefire or a thawing in the relationship between De Laurentiis and Gattuso after that Juve result, with Gattuso kind of towing the sort of company line, and De Laurentiis apparently not as livid as he was before. But I will see how that holds up, I guess, in the coming days.
Yeah, and obviously Napoli do have a lot of injuries, or a lot of players out. There's, I think we said before that Koulibaly's got COVID, and several people. I know that the goalkeeper,
Ospina,
Ospina was injured in the warm-up, wasn't he? And
yeah, I mean they're high-profile players as well. Mertens is still out. Manolas, as you mentioned, Koulibaly and Ospina, Lozano. They actually travelled to this game against Granada with just 12 fit outfield players, and with 6 youth team players. So I do think that has to be factored into things as well. I mean, Gattuso really is up against it. But nonetheless, very, 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 very disappointing result, obviously, for them. And I think it has to be said as well that one of the negative points from Atalanta's stance has been that they have struggled when they've had these back-to-back games, getting that consistency. This week, unusually, Atalanta have had a week to prepare for this game. Napoli haven't. Napoli have all of these injury problems, so you would think it would be advantage Atalanta, but this Napoli team seem to perform best when their backs really are against the wall, so who knows?
Yeah, but you say that, but obviously Atalanta having some injury problems of their own. Hateboer apparently out with a metatarsal injury, won't be available. So obviously one of those other fullbacks.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hateboer is out, and that is a huge blow for Atalanta. But they've got Mele, who has actually I've been quite impressed with when he has been playing. And I think Hateboer is actually the only person on the injury list for Atalanta. So with a week to prepare and an almost full squad to pick from, that's a bit of a luxury that Gasperini hasn't had for a while. But they have been very inconsistent, so I would hesitate to kind of immediately put them down as favourites, but a hugely, hugely important game. It could be the one that ends up deciding who finishes in even in the Champions League spots. I mean, depending on how Roma and Lazio fare as well. But yeah, probably the second best game of the weekend.
And Kenny touches on a great point here, because last week with Juve and Napoli facing off and Milan having a supposedly easy fixture against Spezia, and Inter playing Lazio, we thought it might have been a pivotal week for Milan. Instead, Inter have taken the top spot, and this is the kind of season this is, and it's all there for the taking still.
Yeah, and as you say, Kenny, probably the second best game of this weekend. We don't have time to talk about all of the others, but others to highlight are Cagliari, Torino. Torino obviously coming into this one off the back of 5 draws, but they've been under some better form under the new manager, coming back from 3 goals down against Atalanta. And it's a key game, because if Cagliari win, then Torino will drop into the relegation zone. Also wanted to highlight from last weekend Sassuolo, who beat Crotone 2-1 away. And it was their first win in 7 games since the game against Genoa back in January, when Berardi got injured. And shows what a key player is, because he came back into this one and scored a goal. And Sassuolo play Bologna on Saturday night, so another one to look out for. The other game, which I've just watched this evening, is Braga Roma. Have to say we didn't learn much new about Roma from this one. They in the end were comfortable winners. At least the result shows 2-0. But they probably made pretty hard work of this one.
And Dzeko returned to the score sheet, which is great news for all parties involved.
Yeah, obviously he's been listening to our podcast and wanted to prove us wrong. Okay, good week, bad week. I think we've probably got some fairly obvious choices, especially for bad week, given that we've just been speaking about what a bad week Juventus have had. Any other nominations, or are we happy to stick with them?
I'm happy with Juve. Yeah, not a great week.
We gave Milan last week, so they're out of contention.
And how about the good week? Who's impressed us this week?
It has to be Spezia. They played fantastic.
Yeah, agree, hands down.
Okay, it's a quick fire round this week, but I think that makes sense. So good week Spezia, bad week Juventus.
Nice one.
I think that's it for this section. So we will move on to the honourables and dishonourables. Buzz, you want to kick us off with some birthday wishes?
Yeah, at the time of recording, it is Roberto Baggio's birthday, and obviously he is the divine ponytail for many people. It's just a player who is synonymous with Serie A for a lot of fans, and also synonymous with the Azzurri team. My personal first memories of him are in Italia 90, where he absolutely rocked that tournament along with Toto Schidacci. But perhaps where he really won my heart over was at Italy at the USA 94, where he basically dragged the Italy side, scoring 1 goal in every round and kind of bring them all the way to the final. Some fans like to remember him for that missed penalty, but Italy would have never been in that situation without him. He's one of a few players who's managed to play for Juve, Inter, Milan. He also played for Fiorentina, who hate Juventus as well. And nonetheless, he's universally loved by all Italian fans. And funnily enough, arguably his best career goal doesn't come for one of these massive clubs, but it came for Brescia with a amazing pass from a very young Andrea Pirlo. So happy birthday, Robbie Baggio. You're a legend.
Yeah, and I guess just to prove your point, Boaz, as an Atalanta fan, despite the fact that Baggio played for Brescia, absolutely no negative effect on my love for the player. One of my all-time favorite players.
And Kenny, do you want to go ahead and give an honourable to another legend of Italian football?
Yeah, absolutely. Quagliarella. So this is an honourable mention just for Quagliarella scoring his 92nd Serie A goal for Sampdoria, which makes him the tied second top Serie A goal scorer of all time for Sampdoria.
Good stuff. But on a slightly more serious note, do you want to give us your honourable for Gressler?
Yeah, Andrea Gressler is a Hellas Verona Primavera player, and he was electrocuted a few weeks back at a party with some friends. He reached out for some train lines or something like this, and fell 4 meters. Obviously, he had some terrible injuries, and for a while it looked like he might even lose his life. But apparently, at the time of recording, he just woke up from a coma. Obviously, he has a long way for recovery, but it's great news, and apparently he's a lovely lad, and all the first team at Verona were deeply struck by this.
Yeah, obviously we wish him all the best. And just to lighten the tone a little bit, Kenny, do you want to give us a dishonourable for the criticism of Osimhen this week?
Yeah, so this I think was led by a pundit that a lot of Napoli fans in Italy will be familiar with, Umberto Chiariello. But I think a lot of some other factions of the Napoli sport jumped on the bandwagon criticizing Osimhen for posing for pictures with Ronaldo and Buffon, two childhood heroes of his. I believe after Napoli's victory against Juventus, which makes this all the more ridiculous, Chiariello went on record saying, does he not realize that he's playing in Serie A now? What is he doing posing for pictures with these guys? I mean, have a little bit of humanity and kind of lighten up a little bit, and realize that for some players who get to this level, it's a dream come true, and it's something to be celebrated rather than derided.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you need to have a healthy disrespect for them on the pitch, but I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it is right. It's healthy that your rivals, when you're on the field, and when that stops, you're professionals and you respect each other. I mean, that's how we would all want professional footballers to kind of view each other, in my view.
It's not war.
I've got another honourable for Ante Rebic this week, and it's not as Boaz believes, because I'm the founder of his fan club. There's a story in Croatian media that he's paid off the debts of all the people from his village. Don't know how many people are in his village, but seems like a nice gesture. And he's also donated money for the development of an institute for the education and rehabilitation of children. So not only can he kick a ball really, really hard, seems like a good guy as well. So honourable mention.
And honourable mention to one of our listeners, Serge, as well, for bringing this to our attention.
He's also part of the fan club, I'm sure.
Yeah, co-founder. Kenny, you've got a fan club for Verratti?
Yeah, honourable mention for Marco Verratti for his man of the match performance for PSG in their 4-1 win against Barca at the Camp Nou, of all places. I know that he's not a Serie A player, but an integral part of the Azzurri setup, and I think often an underrated player. So absolutely an honourable mention for him for his performance there.
And PSG are slightly Azzurri tinged anyways, with Moise Kean and Florenzi, who had a great game. So it's good. It bodes well for the Azzurri at Euro 2020.
Speaking of Italian strikers, Baz, you've got another.
Normally I wouldn't give an honourable mention for someone for scoring a penalty, but since we gave Insigne a dishonourable mention for missing his third penalty against Juve, I believe, we have to give him an honourable mention for having balls of steel, for stepping up and taking what ended up being a winning penalty against Juventus. And more to the point, the one he missed was in the cup. So I think scoring in the league and getting the 3 points is probably slightly more important on the balance of things.
Yes, good. And Kenny, what have we got here? One for Luis Muriel.
Yeah, Luis Muriel, who scored a cracker at the weekend to rescue all 3 points for Atalanta against Cagliari in what was a game that really they toiled in. But this is also for the fact that he becomes the 10th highest Atalanta goal scorer of all time. And an interesting sort of anecdote to this is that 3 out of Atalanta's top 10 goal scorers of all time currently play in the side, and that would be 4 had Papu Gomez not moved on to Sevilla. So just an indication of how this Atalanta team ranks. That I mean, just goals galore in terms of sort of in historical terms. So honourable mention for Luis Muriel for me.
Fair play. And as we missed Valentine's Day, I think, Baz, you've got, happy Valentine's Day to all of our listeners. But Baz, you've got a specific honourable for this.
We mentioned Arkadiusz Milik's social media output a few weeks ago when he left Napoli and posted an emotional video. Obviously, Napoli is still in his heart because he posted on Valentine's Day, he posted a picture of him and Napoli president Aurelio De Laurentiis with a big pink heart around it, them hugging, and it says #memories, #happy St. Valentine. So top trolling from Arkadiusz.
Stuff. And for another romantic story that I've got for this honourable mention it came to our attention this week that De Ligt has been wearing the same boots that he beat Real Madrid in when playing for Ajax back in, was it April 2019?
Yeah, something like that.
They look pretty battered, and apparently Adidas was begging him to change them. But I thought that was quite nice. And just to end on something completely ridiculous, Baz.
Yeah, I'd like to give this honorable mention to Gigi Sertor for getting caught with 106 plants of marijuana.
The emphasis is on the getting caught.
Definitely. Sertor is a former Juventus, Inter, Roma, and Parma defender. He's actually got quite a lot of trophies under his belt. He won a few Coppa Italias. He won the UEFA Cup when it still existed with Juventus, Inter, and Parma. But clearly his off-the-field antics are a lot more, let's say, green thumb focused. And on the 12th of February, he was arrested. Apparently, there was a very strong smell from a warehouse where him and his mate were seen coming in and out several times. Unlucky mate. What can I say? He was very quick on the grass in football, and he's very quick on the grass outside of the game.
Maybe slow on the grass outside of the game.
Yeah,
he wasn't
got
quick
caught
enough,
offside.
Fantastic. And on that note, that's definitely all we've got time for this week. Please subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your audio. We'll speak to you next week. Until then, enjoy the football.
Che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. La Juventus è campione d'Italia questa data, il 6 maggio.
Di anticipo, la Roma è campione d'Italia per la stagione 2000-2001. Il titolo
del 2008, l'Inter è campione d'Italia, 16° scudetto per la squadra nerazzurra.
Papa was king on the bongo, Mama was king on the bongo, living on his bongo.